She never knew she was part of the cold billionaire's desperate plan for a child, until she fell in love with him. The day I discovered I was carrying the billionaire's biological child, everything shattered. Xavier slammed the DNA results onto his desk, his eyes accusing, cold as steel. I was carrying our child, not just a surrogate pregnancy, but our actual child. I never meant to fall for him. Never planned to be standing in his office, 8 months pregnant, being accused of manipulating a billionaire. Look me in the eyes, Xavier. Do you honestly think I engineered this? That I somehow switched embryos to trap you? His voice cut like ice. People have tried more elaborate schemes to access the Drake fortune. I placed my hand protectively over my belly where our child kicked furiously, sensing the tension. I've never wanted your money. I agreed to this to help my mother and because I thought you deserved a family despite that cold exterior. But now, I want nothing to do with you. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and fighting for a love you never expected to find? Sometimes the walls we build to shield ourselves become the prisons that keep us from healing. If you've ever had to choose between your principles and someone else's needs, hit subscribe now and join our community of heart-centered stories at Mr. Arden's Heartstories. The fertility clinic smelled of antiseptic and unfulfilled dreams. I had worked there for 3 years, watching hope bloom and wither on countless faces. My desk, a sleek, impersonal thing of glass and chrome, mirrored the sterile precision of the Highland Fertility Institute, where miracles were manufactured under microscopes for those who could afford them. I never expected to become one of those miracles myself. I'm Natalie Reeves, fertility counselor at the most exclusive fertility clinic in the city. My job was to guide hopeful parents through the emotional labyrinth of assisted reproduction. I held hands during negative test results. I celebrated with tearful hugs when treatment succeeded. I translated medical jargon into human terms so people could understand the journey they were embarking on. The day that changed everything started ordinarily enough. I was reviewing patient files when Margot, our receptionist, called with unusual urgency in her voice. Natalie, Dr. Winters wants you in conference room A. Now. I smoothed my skirt, checked my reflection in my computer screen, and grabbed my tablet. Conference room A meant important clients, the ones whose donations funded our research wing, whose names appeared on the brass plaques dotting our hallways. On my way, I passed the wall of success stories. Hundreds of baby photos sent by grateful parents. I often wondered if the children in those frames would ever know how desperately they were wanted, how much had been sacrificed to bring them into existence. Dr. Helena Winters stood when I entered, her silver bob catching the light from floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Beside her sat a man whose presence seemed to compress the air in the room. Natalie Reeves, our fertility counselor, Dr. Winters said. Natalie, this is Xavier Drake, I finished automatically. Everyone in the city knew Xavier Drake. His image appeared regularly in business publications, his name attached to development projects that transformed entire neighborhoods. Drake Enterprises owned half the commercial real estate downtown, and rumor had it he had recently acquired 3 tech startups for billions. At 38, he was the definition of untouchable wealth. In person, he was more severe than his photographs suggested. Tall, with dark hair cut precisely, and eyes the color of winter slate. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, but it was his absolute stillness that unnerved me like a predator conserving energy. He did not stand. Did not offer his hand. Just assessed me with those cold eyes. Miss Reeves will be handling all counseling aspects of your arrangement, Dr. Winters continued. She's our best, completely discreet, and experienced with unique situations. Xavier Drake's gaze never left my face. She looks young. I straightened my spine. I've been counseling fertility patients for 6 years, Mr. Drake. Age and competence are not always correlated. A slight lift of his eyebrow, surprise or amusement, I could not tell. Noted. Dr. Winters slid a file across the table. I'll leave you two to discuss details. Natalie, Mr. Drake has already signed all confidentiality agreements. You have my authorization to provide full-spectrum services. Full-spectrum services. Our code for the bespoke treatments we offer to clients whose wealth exempted them from standard protocols. When the door closed, Drake finally spoke directly to me. Do you know why I'm here, Miss Reeves? I assume you want a child. No, he said flatly. I need an heir. There's a difference. The distinction chilled me. I had counseled hundreds of patients through their fertility journeys, but they came seeking babies to love. None had ever framed it as a business requirement. The Drake legacy spans 6 generations, he continued. My family built this city. That legacy ends with me unless I produce an heir within 2 years. Why 2 years? My grandfather's will stipulates that control of the family holdings transfers to my cousin Malcolm if I have not produced an heir by my 40th birthday. Malcolm would dismantle everything we've built within a decade. So this is about money, I said, disappointment coloring my voice before I could catch it. Those gray eyes narrowed slightly. It's about responsibility, Miss Reeves. Something I would not expect someone in your position to understand. The casual dismissal sparked anger. My position as someone who helps people create families. You're right, I see this as a deeply human endeavor, not a box to check on a succession plan. A tense silence stretched between us. I had probably just cost myself this assignment, and possibly my job. But to my surprise, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. Honesty. Refreshing. He opened the file. I've selected 5 potential surrogates from your program. I require someone intelligent, physically fit, with no hereditary health issues. The egg donor has already been chosen and compensated. My professional mask slipped back into place. We'll need to discuss your involvement level during the pregnancy, birth plans, and post-birth arrangements. Minimal involvement during pregnancy. I'll attend key medical appointments. The birth should be handled discreetly. Afterward, I'll require the surrogate to sign enhanced confidentiality agreements before final payment. Mr. Drake, I said carefully, surrogacy is not just a transaction. These women are carrying a child, your child, for 9 months. There's an emotional component, which is why I'm paying well above standard rates. He closed the file decisively. I understand you handle the feelings. I'm focused on results. We spent the next hour reviewing candidate profiles. He evaluated each woman with clinical detachment, asking about genetic backgrounds, IQ scores, and temperament assessments. Never once did he ask about their hobbies, dreams, or why they had chosen to become surrogates. As he prepared to leave, he fixed me with that penetrating gaze. You disapprove of me. It was not a question. I think you're approaching parenthood like a merger acquisition, I admitted. Children are not assets, Mr. Drake. They're people who need love, attention, and presence. My child will have every advantage, the best education, opportunities, connections. Except perhaps a father who wanted them for themselves, not as a solution to a succession problem. He studied me for a long moment. You have children, Miss Reeves? The question caught me off guard. No. Then perhaps we're both speaking about things we do not fully understand. He handed me his card-heavy stock, minimalist design, just his name and a private number. I've selected 3. Make the arrangements. I'll expect weekly updates. After he left, I sat alone in the conference room, staring at his card. Xavier Drake wanted a child, but not the messy humanity that came with it. I had counseled enough parents to know that life had a way of destroying such neat, controlled plans. I just never expected to become part of that destruction myself. I drove home that evening with Xavier Drake's voice echoing in my head. It's about responsibility. As if creating life was simply another business obligation, like signing a contract or attending a board meeting. My apartment was a stark contrast to the sleek minimalism of the clinic. Small but warm, with overstuffed bookshelves and mismatched furniture collected over years. Photos crowded every surface, mostly of my mother and me through the years. Camping trips when I was young. My college graduation with Mom beaming beside me. The last Christmas before her diagnosis, when her smile was still unclouded by confusion. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch, pulling my laptop onto my knees to begin the paperwork for Xavier Drake's surrogacy arrangement. As I typed, my mind wandered to the surrogate he had selected, a 29-year-old former track athlete named Vanessa. She had 2 children of her own, a stable marriage, and had been a surrogate once before. On paper, she was perfect. But would she understand what it meant to carry a child for a man who viewed parenthood as a business transaction? Would she be prepared for the clinical detachment with which he approached the entire process? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The screen displayed a number I knew by Heart Serene Meadows Care Center, where my mother had lived since her early onset Alzheimer's had progressed beyond my ability to care for her at home. Natalie speaking, I answered, that familiar knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Miss Reeves, this is Martin from billing at Serene Meadows. The voice was professionally apologetic. I'm calling about your mother's account. We're now showing 3 months of outstanding balance. I closed my eyes. Yes, I know. I've been working extra shifts. I'll have a payment by the end of the week. I'm afraid we need more than a partial payment at this point. The account is significantly past due. Without a substantial payment, we'll need to discuss alternative placement options. Alternative placement options. The euphemism made me sick. My mother would be transferred to a state facility with minimal care, where she would be frightened and confused, where the staff would not know that she liked to hold a specific blue blanket when anxious, that classical music calmed her during sundowning episodes. Please, I just need a little more time. I'll figure something out. I'll note that in the file, but I need to inform you that we require payment by the end of the month. Otherwise, we'll have to proceed with transfer arrangements. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment. The reality of my situation pressed down like a physical weight. I was drowning in debt from my mother's care. My salary as a counselor was good, but nowhere near enough to cover the premium care she needed. I thought of Xavier Drake and his millions. How easily he could solve my problems with what would amount to pocket change for him. How unfair the distribution of resources in the world could be. With a sigh, I returned to the surrogacy paperwork. At least I could ensure that Vanessa would be well compensated and protected throughout the process, even if her client viewed her as merely a biological service provider. 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. I was working late, finalizing the surrogate arrangement. The lab had already created embryos using Xavier's sperm and the donor eggs. He had selected a mathematician with Nordic features and an impeccable genetic profile. Tomorrow, we would transfer 2 embryos to Vanessa, who had completed the hormone protocol and was medically ready. My phone rang Dr. Winters, which was unusual at 9 p.m. Natalie, we have a situation. Her voice was tight. The Drake surrogate was in a car accident an hour ago. She's stable, but her injuries mean we cannot proceed with the transfer. My stomach dropped. How serious? Fractured pelvis. She'll recover, but she'll be hospitalized for weeks. We cannot delay. The embryos are prepared, hormonal timing is critical, and Mr. Drake was explicit about his timeline. We'll need to contact the other candidates. None can start the hormone protocol immediately. We need someone who's already in the right phase of their cycle. She paused. Your files indicate you're currently at day 21. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Dr. Winters, you cannot be suggesting it's an unusual request, I know. But you're medically cleared as a staff member, your genetic profile is excellent, and you understand the process better than anyone. This is completely inappropriate and possibly illegal. Mr. Drake is offering triple the standard compensation. This would solve your mother's care situation, Natalie. My breath caught. My mother's early onset Alzheimer's had depleted my savings. The memory care facility had already sent 2 warning notices about overdue payments. This conversation is not happening, I said firmly. Find another solution. He specifically asked for you when I called him about the accident. He what? He said if you were medically suitable, he'd prefer you as the replacement. He mentioned something about trusting your intelligence and integrity. I hung up without responding. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Conference room A. Now. XD, I should have left. Should have walked out the door, driven home, and sent my resignation in the morning. Instead, I found myself standing in the same room where we had first met, facing Xavier Drake again. He looked different tonight, less polished, a hint of stubble darkening his jaw, his tie loosened. Human cracks in the perfect facade. Did Dr. Winters explain the situation? He remained standing, unusual for him. She did. The answer is no. I have not made an offer yet. The answer remains no. It's ethically compromised, potentially illegal, and completely inappropriate given my role as your counselor. He studied me with those gray eyes. $2 million. The number hung in the air between us. Enough to pay for my mother's care for years. Enough to clear my student loans. Enough to change everything. I'm not for sale, Mr. Drake. Everyone has a price, Miss Reeves. Then you have not offered mine. I turned to leave. $3 million. And funding for your mother's care facility, yes, I know about that situation. I make it my business to understand the people I work with. I froze, hand on the doorknob. You researched my personal life. I research everything that matters. I turned back, anger overriding professional restraint. This is exactly why I'm saying no. You see people as commodities. Variables to manipulate. I will not be part of it. Is that what you think this is? For the first time, emotion crept into his voice, frustration, perhaps even hurt. You believe I'm manipulating you? Are not you? Using my mother's illness as leverage? He ran a hand through his hair, another first, a gesture that suggested genuine agitation. I'm offering a solution that benefits us both. I need a surrogate I can trust. You need financial security. And the small matter of me carrying your child. Being connected to you biologically for the rest of my life. The embryos are not biologically mine. The statement stopped me cold. What? He sighed, gesturing for me to sit. When I remained standing, he continued, I cannot father children naturally. Cancer at 19. The embryos were created using a donor who resembles me genetically. But your heir will be legally mine, raised by me, carrying my name. That's what matters for the succession requirements. The revelation shifted something in my understanding of him. Behind the cold exterior stood a man fighting private battles I had not glimpsed. Why me? I asked finally. Why not wait for another surrogate? Because you're the only person who's been honest with me in years. His voice softened fractionally. And because I trust you to honor agreements that I walked home that night, needing the cold air to clear my head. $3 million. My mother's care guaranteed for life. 9 months of my body being used as a vessel for an heir. But it was not just the money. Something in Xavier's revelation had humanized him in a way I had not expected. Cancer at 19. Unable to father children naturally. The Drake legacy poised to end with him unless he found another way. Behind his arrogant exterior was a man facing his own mortality, his own limitations. I thought of my mother in her care facility, sometimes looking at me with blank confusion, other times clutching my hand with desperate recognition. I had promised her I would always take care of her. That promise was getting harder to keep each month. When I reached my apartment, I called the facility. This is Natalie Reeves. I'd like to speak to my mother, please. A few minutes later, her voice came on the line, clear and present, one of her good days. Natalie, sweetheart. How was work today? Complicated, Mom. I'm facing a difficult decision. Is it the right thing to do? That's what I'm trying to figure out. She chuckled softly. You always overanalyze. Remember what I taught you. Follow your heart, but take your brain with you, I recited, smiling despite everything. Exactly. You'll know what to do. You always do. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, weighing impossible choices. By morning, I had made my decision. That night, surrounded by legal documents and medical disclosures in Xavier Drake's sleek downtown office, I signed away 9 months of my life. $3 million. My mother's care guaranteed. And carrying a child that was not biologically his or mine, but would become the Drake heir. I told myself it was just business. A transaction between consenting adults. I was wrong. The embryo transfer was scheduled for 3 days later. Xavier insisted on being present, another surprise. He stood awkwardly at the head of the examination table while Dr. Winters performed the procedure, his eyes fixed on the ultrasound screen. There, Dr. Winters said, pointing to a tiny flash of light. That's the embryo placement. Xavier stared at the screen with an expression I could not decipher: wonder, perhaps, or fear carefully controlled. Is it normal? He asked, revealing an unexpected vulnerability. Perfectly, Dr. Winters assured him. Now we wait 2 weeks to confirm the pregnancy. As I dressed afterward, I realized I had glimpsed a different Xavier Drake than the man who had coldly discussed succession plans. This version watched an embryo transfer with something resembling awe. If you understand what it means to sacrifice your comfort for someone you love, comment sacrifice below and share your experience. Sometimes our greatest acts of love are the ones no one else sees. 2 weeks later, the test was positive. I was carrying the future Drake heir. I had expected to feel nothing or perhaps regret. Instead, I felt a strange sense of purpose. This child might be conceived from unusual circumstances, but it would still be a new life brought into the world. And for the next 9 months, I would be its protector. Xavier requested a meeting as soon as the results were confirmed. I expected a sterile conference room at the clinic. Instead, his assistant directed me to a private dining room at Elysium, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. He stood when I entered, another departure from our first meeting. Miss Reeves, he gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. The formality between us felt strange now that I was carrying a child that would be legally his. Should we not be on a first-name basis at this point? I suggested as I took my seat. He nodded, something like relief crossing his features. Natalie, then. And please call me Xavier. Server appeared with water and disappeared just as quickly. The table was set with fine china and crystal, but no menus. I've taken the liberty of ordering, Xavier said, noting my glance. I consulted with a nutritionist about optimal first trimester foods. I raised an eyebrow. I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself, Xavier. Of course. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I simply thought that you'd control every aspect of this pregnancy. I finished for him. That I'd ensure the best possible environment for the heir to Drake Enterprises, he corrected, but I heard the defensiveness in his tone. I placed my napkin in my lap, choosing my next words carefully. If we're going to do this for the next 9 months, we need to establish some ground rules. My body, my choices. You get input on medical decisions directly affecting the baby, but day-to-day living is my domain. He studied me for a long moment. Very well. That seems reasonable. The meal arrived, simple but elegant dishes rich in protein, folate, and omega-3s. As we ate, Xavier asked questions about the embryo transfer, the confirmation process, and what to expect in the coming weeks. His knowledge was clearly gleaned from research rather than experience, but his interest seemed genuine. How are you feeling? He asked as dessert, fresh berries and a small portion of dark chocolate was served. Tired. A little nauseated in the mornings. Normal first trimester symptoms. And, emotionally. The question surprised me. Are you actually asking about my feelings, Xavier? He set down his fork. Is that so strange? From the man who told me he handles results while I handle feelings? Yes, a bit. He had the decency to look chagrined. Perhaps I was overly clinical in our initial meetings. Perhaps, I agreed, but found myself smiling slightly. As the meal concluded, Xavier handed me a sleek black credit card. For any pregnancy-related expenses. Nutrition, clothing, supplements, transportation to appointments. Use it without hesitation. I started to refuse, but caught myself. This was part of our agreement. The line between personal pride and practical necessity was one I needed to navigate carefully. Thank you, I said instead, tucking the card into my wallet. I'll keep receipts. That's not necessary. He paused. There's something else. I've arranged for a car service to be at your disposal. I know you take the subway to work. That becomes increasingly impractical as the pregnancy progresses. Now you're being excessive. I'm being practical. The Drake heir should not be subjected to the jolts and crowds of public transportation. I opened my mouth to argue, then realized the absurdity of the situation, debating subway safety with a billionaire who probably had not used public transportation since childhood, if ever. Fine. I'll use the car service for doctor's appointments. And work. We'll see. That he smiled then, unexpected and genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to something almost approachable. You're stubborn. You're controlling. Perhaps we're both right. As I stood to leave, he rose as well. I'll set up our weekly meetings. To monitor progress. They're called prenatal appointments, Xavier. And yes, I expect you'll want to attend them. Not just those. I'd like regular updates. Perhaps over dinner, like tonight. I studied him, trying to understand his motivation. Is this about the baby or about ensuring your investment is properly managed? His expression closed slightly. Both, I suppose. At least he was honest. Dinners are acceptable, but I get to choose the restaurant at least half the time. Agreed. His driver will contact you tomorrow about morning pickup. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I had just negotiated dinner arrangements with one of the city's most powerful men, while carrying what would become his legal child. My life had veered into territory so unfamiliar I had no map to navigate it. And the journey had only just begun. The pregnancy changed our relationship in ways I had not anticipated. Xavier insisted on weekly meetings to discuss my health, the development of the baby, and any concerns. What began as clinical updates gradually evolved into actual conversations. I learned he worked 18-hour days not just from ambition, but because the emptiness of his penthouse apartment felt suffocating. That he remembered his mother, who died when he was 12, only in fragments, the scent of gardenia perfume, her habit of singing off-key while cooking. That his father had been emotionally absent long before his actual death 3 years ago. He measured love in achievements, Xavier said during our 4th month, as we reviewed the latest ultrasound images in his office. Trophies, academic awards, business successes, those were the currencies of his affection. Is that why the legacy matters so much? I asked, one hand unconsciously resting on my growing belly. To prove something to him. Xavier's eyes followed the movement of my hand. Perhaps. Or maybe to do better. To be more than he was. How? He looked up, meeting my gaze. I have not figured that part out yet. I met his admission with silence, recognizing the cost of such honesty from a man who had spent his life projecting certainty. In that moment, the distance between billionaire and fertility counselor seemed to shrink, replaced by the simple recognition of two people carrying childhood wounds into adulthood. As my body changed, so did the boundaries between us. Xavier began attending every doctor's appointment, asking detailed questions about nutrition and development. He sent daily texts checking on my well-being. When morning sickness hit unexpectedly during a meeting at his office, he held my hair back without comment, then had his chef prepare specialized anti-nausea meals delivered to my apartment daily. I still maintained my work at the clinic, though Dr. Winters had arranged a reduced schedule. My colleagues knew only that I was serving as a surrogate for a high-profile client, a technically accurate if incomplete explanation. I continued counseling other fertility patients, now with a deepened understanding of the emotional complexity of carrying a child that would not be your own. In my 5th month, I developed a craving for street tacos from a specific food truck that parked downtown on Tuesday afternoons. Xavier, upon learning of this, rescheduled a board meeting to accompany me, watching with poorly disguised horror as I devoured messy, sauce-dripping tacos on a public park bench. "You should see your face right now," I laughed, wiping salsa from my chin. "Is it safe to eat from a food truck?" He eyed the vendor suspiciously. "Millions of people eat street food every day, Xavier." "Not millions of people are carrying the Drake Air," he muttered, but accepted the taco I thrust toward him. "Try it before you judge." His first bite was tentative, his second enthusiastic. His eyes widened in surprise. "This is actually good. Welcome to how the other half lives." He looked around the park at the office workers on lunch breaks, mothers with strollers, elderly couples on benches. A normal, everyday scene completely outside his usual experience. "I almost never come to this part of downtown," he admitted. "You own buildings here but never visit them." "I see financial reports, architectural renderings, occupancy rates. Not this." He gestured at the living, breathing city around us. "That's a shame. You're missing the best parts." After finishing our lunch, we walked through the park instead of immediately returning to his waiting car. I noticed he slightly adjusted his pace to match my slower, pregnancy-altered gait. "What was your childhood like?" he asked unexpectedly. "Happy. Simple. My mom raised me alone, but she made sure I never felt something was missing. We did not have much money, but she found free activities everywhere, museum days, library programs, picnics in parks like this." "You were close." "Very. She was my best friend, my biggest supporter. She worked as a school librarian, which meant we always had books. She read to me every night until I was old enough to read novels on my own." "And your father?" "Left when I was 7. I have vague memories, a deep laugh, the smell of wood shavings from his workshop. He moved across the country, started a new family. Christmas cards for a few years, then nothing." Xavier was quiet for a moment. "Your mother sounds remarkable." "She is. Was. The disease has taken so much of her now. Sometimes she thinks I'm her sister. Sometimes she does not recognize me at all. That's why you became a surrogate. For her care." It was not a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes. And because." I glanced down at my belly. "I'm not sure I'll ever have children of my own." This felt like a way to experience pregnancy while helping someone else. "Why would you not have children? You're clearly good with people, emotionally intelligent. You'd make an excellent mother." The compliment, delivered in his matter-of-fact tone, caught me off guard. "My dating history is a disaster," I admitted with a small laugh. "I'm married to my job. And after watching families struggle so hard to conceive, I'm acutely aware of how fleeting the opportunity might be." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The clinic changes how you see parenthood. Completely. I've held the hands of women going through their 7th round of IVF. I've watched couples deplete their life savings for a chance at a family. It makes you realize that having children is neither guaranteed nor simple." We reached a small pond where ducks glided across the surface. Xavier seemed fascinated by the ordinary scene. "I never did this," he said quietly. "Just walked. Noticed things. There was always a schedule, an agenda, a goal to be met." "What about now?" I asked. "What's your agenda for this moment?" He considered this, then smiled slightly. To learn about the woman carrying my child. To understand what shapes her. He paused. To feel normal, just for an hour. Is it working? Surprisingly, yes. During month 5, I felt the baby kick for the first time during our weekly dinner meeting. Without thinking, I grabbed Xavier's hand and placed it on my stomach. There, feel that? The moment his palm touched me, something shifted in the atmosphere between us. His eyes widened as the baby kicked again, stronger this time. That's remarkable, he whispered, his usual composure faltering. His hand lingered, warm against my skin. When our eyes met, I saw something I had never expected to see in Xavier Drake: wonder, unguarded and raw. I pulled away first, suddenly aware of crossing professional boundaries. Sorry, I should not have. No, he interrupted, voice rough. Thank you for sharing that. The waiter chose that moment to appear with dessert, breaking the intimate tension. We finished the meal discussing practical matters. The nursery Xavier was planning, the birth plan we needed to establish, whether to learn the baby's sex at the next ultrasound. But something had changed between us. The careful professional distance we had maintained was crumbling, replaced by something neither of us had anticipated when signing those sterile legal documents months ago. That night, I admitted to myself what I had been trying to ignore for weeks. I was developing feelings for a man who saw me as a vessel for his legacy, not a woman. Over the next few weeks, I tried to rebuild the emotional walls that had begun to crumble. I kept our discussions focused on the pregnancy and preparations for the baby's arrival. I declined dinner invitations when possible, suggesting quick lunches instead. I stopped sharing personal anecdotes about my day or my past. Xavier noticed, of course. He was too observant not to. Have I offended you in some way? He asked during our 6th-month checkup, after I had given another one-word answer to his attempt at personal conversation. Not at all, I replied, focusing on gathering my things as Dr. Winters left us alone in the examination room. I'm just trying to maintain appropriate boundaries. He frowned. We're well past appropriate boundaries, Natalie. You're carrying my child. I'm carrying a child that will legally be yours, I corrected. There's a distinction. A few weeks ago, you would not have been so precise with your language. A few weeks ago, I was not thinking clearly about our arrangement. And now? Now I'm remembering that this is a business transaction. You need an heir, I need money for my mother's care. Emotional complications benefit neither of us. His expression closed, the familiar mask of Xavier Drake, businessman, sliding back into place. I see. Very pragmatic, Miss Reeves. The reversion to formality stung more than it should have. Yes, well, pragmatism is underrated. As we walked to the elevator in uncomfortable silence, I wondered if I had imagined the connection between us. Perhaps it was simply pregnancy hormones, or wishful thinking, or the strange intimacy that came from sharing such a life-altering experience. But when his hand rested lightly on the small of my back as we entered the elevator, a gesture that could be read as either possessiveness or protection, I knew I was not the only one struggling with the blurring lines between transaction and relationship. By the 7th month, our weekly meetings had expanded to include dinner. We discussed names, pediatricians, and educational philosophies. Xavier revealed he had converted part of his penthouse into a nursery, not the sterile, professionally designed space I had expected, but something he had apparently planned himself, with book-filled shelves and a ceiling painted with constellations. Would you like to see it? He asked one evening as our dinner concluded. The nursery? Yes. I value your opinion. You might notice things I've overlooked. It was the first time he had invited me to his home, the place where the child I carried would grow up. Despite my resolve to maintain emotional distance, curiosity won out. I suppose that would be helpful, I agreed. His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building he owned downtown. The elevator opened directly into a foyer of marble and steel, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering city below. The space was exactly what I had imagined. Sleek, minimalist, and impeccably designed, but with a coldness that spoke of a showcase rather than a home. Until he led me to the nursery. The room was a revelation. Warm cream walls instead of stark white. A hand-carved wooden crib instead of some modern designer piece. Bookshelves filled with children's classics. And above, a ceiling painted midnight blue with constellations mapped out in exquisite detail. My mother loved astronomy, he explained when I expressed surprise. She taught me to find Orion's belt when I was 4. You never talk about her, I observed, running my hand along the crib rail. It's difficult to describe someone who exists mainly as an absence. He studied his hands. What about your father? Left when I was 7. Mom raised me alone. That's why you work so hard to care for her now. Not a question. She gave everything for me. I owe her the same. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Loyalty matters. Is that why you're fighting so hard for the Drake legacy? Loyalty? Partly. He hesitated. And partly because it's the only family I have. The words hung between us, heavy with unspoken loneliness. I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. This is where the baby will grow up. All this luxury, all this isolation. You find it isolating, don't you? I turned to face him. When was the last time you had friends over for dinner? Family gatherings? Holiday celebrations? He was silent for a long moment. My social engagements tend to be business-related. That's not the same. Children need warmth, Xavier. They need homes filled with laughter and mess and imperfection. And you think I cannot provide that, he said, a hint of defensiveness returning to his voice. I think you have not experienced it yourself. It's hard to create something you've never known. To my surprise, he did not argue. Instead, he crossed to a built-in cabinet and pulled out a photo album incongruously old-fashioned in this ultramodern space. My mother, he said, opening to the first page. Before she got sick. The photograph showed a striking woman with Xavier's gray eyes, laughing as she pushed a young boy on a swing. Her joy was radiant, unreserved. She was beautiful, I said softly. She was full of life. Always singing, dancing, finding wonder in ordinary things. He turned the page. Then the headache started. Brain tumor. Inoperable. He showed me more photos, creating a timeline of his mother's decline, the vibrant woman gradually replaced by someone increasingly fragile, though her smile remained in each image. My father could not handle it, Xavier continued, his voice carefully controlled. He buried himself in work, left her care to nurses. He was barely there when she died. I'm so sorry, Xavier. I was 12. Old enough to understand that my father had chosen the company over being with her when she needed him most. He closed the album. I swore I'd never make someone I loved feel abandoned that way. Yet here you are, alone in this beautiful prison of a penthouse, pushing everyone away. He looked up sharply. That's unfair. Is it? You're about to become a father, Xavier. Are you going to measure your child's worth in achievements like your father did? Or will you learn from your mother how to find joy in ordinary moments? I saw anger flash across his face, followed quickly by something more complex, hurt, perhaps, or recognition. I have not invited you here to psychoanalyze me, Natalie. No, you invited me to see the nursery. And it's lovely. But a beautiful room does not make a childhood. His expression remained guarded, and I sighed. I should go. As his driver took me home, I wondered if I had gone too far. Xavier Drake was not used to being challenged, especially about something as personal as his capacity for emotional connection. Yet something told me that beneath his cold, controlled exterior was a man desperate for the very things he denied himself: warmth, belonging, family in the truest sense. If you believe people can change when given the chance to heal their deepest wounds, hit that like button right now. Sometimes, the most broken people have the greatest capacity for transformation. They just need someone brave enough to show them the way. Over the next several weeks, a cautious warmth returned to our interactions. Xavier never mentioned our conversation in the nursery, but small changes suggested he had taken my words to heart. He began asking about my day before discussing the pregnancy. He sent flowers to my mother's care facility. He shared occasional stories from his own workday, not just achievements, but moments of frustration or humor. When I mentioned feeling uncomfortable in my apartment's small shower as my pregnancy advanced, a team arrived the next day to install safety rails and a shower seat. When I complained about back pain, a prenatal massage therapist appeared at my door with a portable table and a note: "This is not manipulation. It's care." I found myself looking forward to our meetings, appreciating the growing ease between us. Though I still reminded myself regularly that our connection was temporary, defined by a contract and a pregnancy that would eventually end. At 8 months, everything imploded. I arrived for our weekly meeting to find Xavier agitated, pacing his office. On his desk lay a folder embossed with the Highland Fertility Institute logo. "What's wrong?" I asked, lowering myself carefully into a chair. He stopped pacing. "Did you know?" "Know what?" He pushed the folder toward me. Inside was a DNA profile comparing 2 samples with a 50% match probability. "The lab ran routine verification tests," he said, voice tight with controlled emotion. "The embryo's DNA does not match the donor profile we selected." "That's impossible," I began, but a sick feeling was already spreading through me. "It matches mine." His eyes locked on mine. "The embryo we transferred was not from the donor. It was created with my sperm." The room seemed to tilt. "But you said," I was told, "I could not father children." Apparently, the oncologist was wrong. His laugh held no humor. "One viable sample, frozen when I was 19, before treatment began. Dr. Winters discovered the mix-up this morning." I struggled to process this revelation. "So the baby is biologically mine. And carries your genetic material, not the donor's." The implication hit me with full force. This was not just a surrogate arrangement anymore. This was our child, mine and Xavier's, created through a laboratory error. "Did you know?" he asked again, his voice dangerously quiet. "How could I possibly have known? You work there. You had access to the files, the lab reports." Anger flared, hot and protective. "You think I engineered this? Swapped embryos to, what? Trap the billionaire? Get more money?" It would not be the first time someone tried to manipulate their way into the Drake fortune. I stood, one hand supporting my belly where our actual child, shifted restlessly, as if sensing the tension. "I've never wanted your money, Xavier. I agreed to this arrangement to help my mother, and because, God help me, I thought you deserved a chance at the family you clearly longed for despite your cold exterior." Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. I did not know about the mix-up. But now that I do, I want nothing more to do with you. I walked out of his office, out of the building, and into the rain. I had just blown up my life, my future, and any financial security for my mother. But in that moment, all that mattered was protecting the child I now understood was truly mine. The reality of my situation hit me fully once I reached my apartment. I had walked away from $3 million. From guaranteed care for my mother. From the security that would have come with the surrogate arrangement. And for what? Pride? The right to raise a child I had not planned for or expected. I sank onto my couch, my hands cradling my belly where my baby, not just any baby, but my biological child, kicked rhythmically against my palm. "What do I do now, little one?" I whispered. "How do we navigate this mess I've gotten us into?" My phone had been buzzing continuously since I left Xavier's office. Calls from him, from Dr. Winters, from his assistant. I silenced them all, needing space to think, to process the seismic shift in my reality. Eventually, I called a lawyer, not the high-powered type Xavier would use, but a friend from college who had focused on family law. "So let me get this straight," Rachel said after I explained the situation. "You signed on as a surrogate for a billionaire, but it turns out the baby is actually yours and is due to a lab mix-up that about covers it. And now you've walked away from the arrangement because he accused you of engineering the whole thing?" "Yes." She whistled low. "Natalie, the contracts you signed are likely still binding, mix-up or not. Even though the fundamental circumstances have changed. I'm carrying my own biological child. That makes it more complicated, not less. Did the contract specify whose genetic material would be used?" I thought back to the mountain of legal documents I had signed. In general terms, yes. It specified donor eggs and his or donor sperm. But there were clauses about accepting the result of the procedure regardless of outcome. Rachel sighed. Those clauses were probably designed to prevent a surrogate from rejecting a baby with unexpected characteristics or health issues. But they could be interpreted to cover this situation too. So what are my options? If you want to keep the baby, you'd need to fight a legal battle against a billionaire with unlimited resources who believes you manipulated him. Even with the truth on your side, that's a steep uphill climb. And if I do not fight? The contract likely stipulates that you relinquish all parental rights upon birth. The child would legally be his, despite being biologically yours. My stomach lurched. That cannot be right. No court would force a mother to give up her biological child. It's complicated, Rachel said gently. You entered into the arrangement voluntarily. The fact that the child is biologically yours was unknown at the time, but the intent of the agreement was clear. I hung up feeling worse than before. The weight of my impulsive exit from Xavier's office pressed down on me. I had reacted emotionally, without thinking through the consequences. Now I faced the possibility of losing a child I had not known was mine until today. 3 days passed without direct word from Xavier. Dr. Winters called twice, her voice messages growing increasingly concerned about my prenatal care. The clinic's lawyer sent a formal letter reminding me of my contractual obligations. My mother's care facility left a message about another missed payment. I felt trapped, cornered by circumstances I had never anticipated when I agreed to be a surrogate. I began researching options: cheaper facilities for my mother, second jobs I could take after the birth, legal aid organizations that might help me fight for my child. On the 4th day, as I contemplated selling my apartment to cover immediate expenses, someone knocked at my door. Xavier stood in my hallway, unshaven, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He held a small wooden box in his hands. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He placed the box on my coffee table, not meeting my eyes. "I owe you an apology. Just one." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Several, likely." He gestured to the box. "This belonged to my mother. I want you to see it." Inside lay a journal, its leather cover worn soft with handling. Xavier opened it carefully, turning to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "My father told me she died of pneumonia. I believed him until I found this after his death." He turned the journal toward me. "She was pregnant when she died. There were complications. And my father chose to save the company's annual shareholders meeting rather than be with her at the hospital." I read the painful words, written in a delicate hand: "Harrison chose not to come. Again. The doctor says this bleeding is not normal. I'm afraid, but I'll face this like everything else alone." "She died feeling abandoned by the man who should have protected her," Xavier said quietly. "I've spent my life building walls to ensure I'd never be vulnerable to that kind of pain. Never need anyone who might not be there." He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "Then I watched you walk out my door, carrying our child, a child I did not know could exist, and I realized I'd become my father. Putting legacy before love. Control before connection." "Xavier, let me finish. Please." He took a deep breath. I do not want an heir to fulfill my grandfather's will conditions. I want our child to have what I never did, parents who choose them, who show up, who put family before fortune. He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. I cannot undo our beginning. Cannot erase the cold, calculating way I approached all this. But I'm asking, begging for the chance to show you and our child that I can be more than the Drake legacy. More than my father's son. What are you saying, Xavier? I'm saying I love you, Natalie Reeves. Not as the surrogate for my heir, but as the woman whose strength and honesty broke through every wall I built. The woman who makes me want to be worthy of the miracle growing between us. Tears filled my eyes. How do I know this is not another calculation? Another strategy? You do not. Not yet. He brushed a tear from my cheek. I can only ask for the chance to prove it, day by day, choice by choice. I looked into his eyes, searching for deception, for manipulation, for the cold calculation I had first seen in that conference room months ago. Instead, I saw vulnerability, fear, and something I had never expected. That I do not know if I can trust this, I admitted. Everything has changed so quickly. Then we'll take it slowly. He squeezed my hands gently. The contracts are void. I've already instructed my lawyers. Whatever happens between us, this baby is yours as much as mine. We'll figure out parenthood together, in whatever way you're comfortable with. And my mother? Her care is guaranteed regardless. That's not conditional on anything between us. It never should have been. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. The relief was overwhelming, not just financial security for my mother, but freedom from the crushing weight of an impossible choice. Thank you, I whispered. Do not thank me for doing what I should have done from the beginning. He reached up cautiously, brushing hair from my face. I want to do better, Natalie. Be better. For our child. And if you'll let me, for you too. I could not give him the answer he wanted, not yet. Too much had happened, too many revelations and shifts in our reality. But I could give him the truth. I have feelings for you, I admitted. Feelings I tried to ignore because they complicated everything. But I do not know if they're enough. If we're enough. This started as a business arrangement. I'm not sure it can become something real. That's fair. More than fair. He stood, giving me space. We have time to figure it out. May I still be involved with the pregnancy? The doctor's appointments, the preparations? Yes. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling our child move beneath my palm. This baby deserves to have both parents involved, whatever happens between us. The weeks that followed were a careful dance of rebuilding trust. Xavier attended every appointment, but never pressured me for more than I was ready to give. He helped prepare my apartment for the baby, but also ensured the nursery in his penthouse was ready. He made it clear that every decision where the baby would live, how we would co-parent, was mine to make when I was ready. Slowly, cautiously, I began to believe in his transformation. It showed in small ways: how he spoke to service workers with new awareness, how he listened to my concerns without immediately offering solutions, how he rearranged his schedule around my needs without complaint. On a deeper level, I saw him wrestling with the legacy of his father, questioning the values that had shaped Drake Enterprises, reconsidering what truly mattered in building a life worth living. At 9 months, we had reached an understanding, not quite romance, not merely co-parents, but something evolving with its own organic timeline. I had agreed to stay in his guest suite for the final week of my pregnancy, as my due date approached and my tiny apartment became increasingly impractical. The night my water broke, 3 days before my scheduled induction, Xavier was working late in his home office. I waddled to his door, strangely calm despite the contractions already building in intensity. "It's time," I said simply. He looked up, papers forgotten, eyes widening. "Now?" "Unless you have other plans," I teased, then winced as another contraction tightened across my abdomen. He was on his feet instantly, guiding me to a chair, calling the doctor, gathering the hospital bag we had prepared. His efficiency was impressive, but it was the tremor in his hands that told me how deeply this moment affected him. During the drive to the hospital, he held my hand through each contraction, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on my skin. "Are you scared?" he asked softly. "Terrified," I admitted. "You. More than I've ever been in my life." I squeezed his hand, finding comfort in our shared vulnerability. "We're going to meet our daughter today." We had learned the baby's sex at the last ultrasound, a healthy girl with all markers perfect. Xavier had looked stunned when the technician pointed out the evidence, his usual eloquence reduced to a breathless, "a daughter." The labor was long but uncomplicated. Xavier never left my side, not when I cursed through contractions, not when I cried that I could not do it anymore, not when the hours stretched endlessly into the night. He fed me ice chips, massaged my back, and whispered encouragement that grew increasingly desperate as my exhaustion mounted. "You're the strongest person I know," he said as the doctor announced it was finally time to push. "You've got this, Natalie." "I cannot." "Yes, you can. Our daughter is counting on you." "I'm counting on you." Then softer, "I love you. Whether you ever feel the same or not, I love you, and I'll be here for both of you always." Those words, spoken in a moment of raw truth, gave me the final strength I needed. Our daughter was born as dawn broke over the city, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of fierce, squalling life with Xavier's gray eyes and my stubborn chin. When the nurse placed her in his arms, I watched the last of his carefully constructed armor fall away, replaced by wonder and terror in equal measure. "Hello, Elena," he whispered, using the name we had chosen to honor his mother. "I've been waiting for you." As he placed her gently in my arms, our fingers touched and held. Not a business arrangement anymore, but something neither of us had been looking for, a family created through mistakes, misunderstandings, and the courage to choose love over legacy. 1 year later, I stood in the nursery of our home, not Xavier's sleek penthouse, but a brownstone with a small backyard and rooms filled with a comfortable mixture of elegant pieces and practical furniture. Photographs covered the walls, my mother holding Elena during a moment of clarity, Xavier and Elena asleep together on the couch, the three of us at her christening. The corporate empire Xavier had once been so desperate to preserve still thrived, but with new priorities. He had reduced his hours, delegated more responsibility, and established a foundation focused on fertility treatments for those who could not afford them. The succession issue had been resolved through legal restructuring rather than a literal heir, removing the sword that had hung over his head for so long. My mother's care continued at the best facility, and though her condition progressed, she still had days when she recognized Elena, when her eyes lit up at the sight of her granddaughter. I felt Xavier's arms encircle me from behind as I gazed down at our sleeping daughter, her dark hair curled against the pillow, her tiny hand clutching the stuffed elephant he had bought the day after her birth. "Still can't believe she's real sometimes," he murmured against my hair. I leaned back into his embrace. "I was just thinking the same thing. Not just her." He turned to face him. "All of this. You. Us. Sometimes I wake up afraid it was all a dream, that I'm still that cold, empty person focused only on legacy and control." "That person saved my mother," I reminded him, touching his face. "He was not all bad. Just lost." "You found me," he said simply. "We found each other." As Elena stirred in her crib, beginning to wake from her afternoon nap, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. A journey that began with a clinical arrangement in a sterile conference room and led to this moment of ordinary, everyday love. Xavier Drake had planned for an heir but found something far more valuable, a heart he thought cancer had rendered impossible, and a love that no succession plan could have anticipated. And I, who had counseled hundreds through their family journeys, finally understood that the most profound transformations often begin with our deepest wounds and the courage to let someone else see them. Subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories if you believe that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with our most painful choices. Turn on notifications so you never miss another story about how love transforms us in the most unexpected ways.